In these two chapters, we're talking about, as the theme describes, discrimination and inequality. And I'll be honest, this is where economists generally look pretty bad because remember, many of us are just scientists. We measure things and report on them, and we model their behavior. So it can make us seem pretty cold about things. And it certainly comes out with the economics of discrimination because the general view, in its um, in its strictest sense, in some senses, that there's no discrimination, even though we do see it. We see differences in terms across um, racial categories, across genders. Um, we see these differences in income for occupations, differences in wealth accumulation, differences in home ownership rates, all those kinds of things. And yet, economists would argue that basically, um, if discrimination doesn't make any sense, then it makes someone less efficient and therefore will be competed out by those who do not discriminate. So, in other words, there's a socially appropriate amount of discrimination and that it provides some social purpose. I'm not sure I would go with that. That's kind of our notion of what's called kind of rational discrimination. Um, it, the University of Chicago does a lot of work on this as well. But in this chapter, I want you to, I'm going to talk about it from the approach as an economist. But I don't want you to think that Scheiding as a person doesn't think that discrimination exists, because I certainly do. As a personal opinion, again, my opinion shouldn't matter that much. It's just my personal opinion. As an economist, I would argue it may be there, but the amount that we have is socially rational. Um, but for me, in some sense, it just illustrates the continued unfairness in the world that we all have to kind of try to fight against. Maybe I'd say fight against it, but some of you would say, I don't know, maybe I don't know, there's probably someone in this class who probably thinks there's not enough. And again, that's kind of your own personal point of view. It's just that my own point of view is not aligned with that. Uh, in chapter 31, we're then looking at the notion of fairness or the lack thereof in terms of income and wealth. And that's, the rich do indeed keep getting richer. And if anything, COVID exacerbated that even further. The rich got even richer during the pandemic, and the poor did get poorer. Um, Economic markets don't say very much, comment very much on how things are distributed. When we get these kinds of pushes from time to time about needing to get more involved in how income is distributed and how wealth is distributed, um, but um, there is obviously unfair. In the United States, it's particularly unfair, and that's what we talk a bit about in chapter 31, in which you will talk to me about in the fifth analysis paper.